All right, today I'm going to be diving into the film Hard Eight by Paul Thomas Anderson. This was directed in 1996, and it's a drama slash crime and mostly a mystery movie. This is actually my third PTA film in my last four movie watches, so we are just flying through his filmography. This was PTA's first feature film, and he was in his mid 20s when he directed it, which makes me feel really old. There were some solid moments here that made it worth a watch. It wasn't my favorite, but I'm not mad to have seen it. Let's dive into the review. So honestly, this movie is hard to describe without spoilers, but I'll try my best to provide an overview of the plot. The movie starts with a young man named John who is down on his luck after losing his money gambling. He is sitting outside of a coffee shop looking dejected when he is approached by a mysterious older man named Sidney. Now, Sidney takes John under his wing, offering to buy him a cup of coffee and bumming him a cigarette before teaching him how to work a casino's comp system to get a free hotel room for a night. After gaining John's trust, there's a time skip of about 2 years where we see John is now thriving and still very much looking up to Sidney. And after this time skip, we also meet Clementine, who works as a waitress at the casino, and then Jimmy, who is John's crass friend that is unapologetically himself. Their stories all intertwine and unfold in unexpected ways. That's about the best spoiler free summary that I can give. But when looking for a theme or overarching message that the movie was trying to portray, I think there's two. The first is how futile it is to try to run from your past. The second theme that I got out of this movie is how important it is to live a life of truth. They kind of intertwine. I firmly believe that all our choices and our actions define who we are, and all we can do is confront ourselves and try to be better moving forward. So if you're trying to cover up your past self, then there's not really any growth taking place, and it only leads you to causing more hurt in the other people in your life. Um, there's a recurring theme of placing large bets on hard eight at a craps table. The character who is trying to run away from their past loses this bet twice, while the character who is fully truthful hits big on the same bet later in the movie. This was a cool, subtle way to show how life rewards honesty, in my opinion. Then the very last shot of the movie drives this point home in a non-subtle way. It was a cool ending shot, but a little on the nose for me. But it showed that even when we're taking extreme measures to keep our past hidden, it's still there because this character was not being forthcoming throughout the movie. Maybe I'm not reading into the themes perfectly or as PTA intended, but that's what I got out of it. There's really four main actors that we follow throughout the movie. John C. Reilly plays the young man John. Philip Baker Hall plays the older man Sidney. Gwyneth Paltrow plays the casino waiter Clementine, and Samuel L. Jackson plays John's foul mouthed friend Jimmy. There's also a small cameo by Philip Seymour Hoffman as a player at the craps table for about 30 seconds of comedic relief. Honestly, I thought Gwyneth Paltrow had the outstanding performance in this one. As Clementine, she was required to convey a whole range of emotions, which I thought she handled beautifully. She really became the character and put on a really believable performance. Philip Baker Hall had a very subdued performance, void of almost all emotion throughout, even when things were hitting the fan. I didn't really love it, but I will say he has a voice that is smooth like butter, and I could listen to him narrate an audiobook any day. This is the first time I've seen John C. Reilly in a fully dramatic role, and he was just okay for me. Anytime his character was feeling incredibly stressed and or crying, I didn't buy it for a second, unfortunately, especially the scene in the hotel room. When he wasn't expressing those big emotions, I think he did a fine job, though. And then Samuel L. Jackson played himself, and he is honestly one of my favorite actors just based on how consistently he can bring so much energy to any and every role. He's kind of like Nick Cage in that way. I always enjoy seeing both of them on the screen, but that's just my opinion. If there's one thing I've learned while watching these PTA movies, it's that he loves himself a long single take shot. And lucky for me, I do too. He had a couple that I wanted to point out that were really exceptional, especially for a first film. While we were being first introduced to Sydney, there's this wonderful tracking shot that follows him throughout the casino. The lighting and blocking are wonderful to me. It showed me how Sydney was trying to hide in plain sight while being in the middle of a crowded casino. And here's a short clip of that shot so you can see that. The second long shot that caught my attention was when John, Sydney, and Clementine were leaving a hotel room. The camera is moving in front of these three, leading them out the door, down the steps, across the parking lot, and then captures their cars leaving the scene. Letting a scene breathe is one of the best things a director can do to build tension, and I think this is a great example of that. So here's the ending of that shot with the cars leaving the lot. Outside of those two specific shots, there was also one shot that reminded me of a scene from Jackie Brown. I won't show it as it's a spoiler, but someone is sitting in the dark with a gun waiting for their target to arrive, and they practice holding up and pointing the gun at the door at their intended victim. And that just is a kind of a fun similarity to Jackie Brown, even though that movie came out 2 years later. I just thought I'd point that out. It was kind of fun for me. Outside of these items, there's not much else to write home about regarding the visuals in this one. Costumes are nothing really special, and either are most of the set pieces outside of the casino. I couldn't even tell you what John was wearing for most of the movie, and I just watched it yesterday. But to be fair, the visuals don't need to be the focus of most crime dramas, so I don't really hold it too much against this movie. The soundtrack to Heart 8 had a lot of ambient jazz. As a former jazz band member on tenor sax, I enjoy some solid jazz tunes. The noir feel of these tunes definitely fit the vibe of the film and its slowly unraveling mystery, but I didn't think any of it was particularly memorable. It was almost like listening to elevator music for me. There were no motifs that were repeated, and some of the more dramatic scenes seemed like they just had pure silence in the background. I personally think that the music could have been used much more effectively in this one. With the absence of music for a lot of the scenes, PTA really had to rely on his writing to carry this film for the majority of the runtime. The first act really held my attention, and I was so interested in learning more about our two leads, John and Sydney. However, during the hotel room scene and for the rest of the movie, I felt that the writing really went downhill. To me, it felt like PTA fell into the trap of tell, don't show, which is the exact opposite of what I've always heard. Major plot points and twists are just yelled at other characters with no build up or explanation, and each new revelation just raised more questions for me, but unfortunately, those questions went unanswered. I don't mind ambiguous endings, but ambiguous character motivations are where I draw the line. Just kidding. I did think that PTA used the show don't tell method to great effectiveness with the final shot of the movie. Like I said, I thought it was a bit on the nose, but it drove home the point of the movie for me. The one line that stuck out to me from this one was actually in the first scene. John is being rude to Sydney after Sydney had just bought him a cup of coffee, and so Sydney says to him, "Never ignore a man's courtesy." It's a simple line, but really shows the level of respect that Sydney demands from just about everyone that he encounters throughout the movie. His mysterious aura is what carries the first half of the film for me. So overall, there was some good and some meh in this one. Nothing really blew me away, but I didn't regret watching it. Like I said, it might be fun to rewatch down the road to see if I can catch any interactions between characters that have different meanings now that I know the twists, but I won't be in a rush to do so. I would recommend this movie to PTA completionists, of course. Anyone that likes Samuel L. Jackson, like myself, anyone who wants to see John C. Reilly in a dramatic leading role, anyone who likes craps, although it's not featured as much as I thought it would be, and anyone who likes to see a mystery unfold. Oh, and if you want to see Gwyneth Paltrow actually act, because her performance here and her performances as Pepper Potts in the MCU are night and day, in my opinion. Anyways, all that being said, I'd give Hard 8 a Hard 3. So if you disagree or agree, let me know. Thanks for watching.